If this story found you tonight, please hit that subscribe button. I am asking you genuinely. I write stories like this every single week, stories that feel real, stories that stay with you, stories about love and loss and the people who change everything just by walking through a door. You found this one for a reason. Don't miss the next one. Subscribe right now. It takes 2 seconds and it means everything. Leave a comment and tell me which moment broke you. Tell me about someone you're still showing up for. Tell me if you have a Sophie. And share this story. Send it to your friends, your sister, the person you've been thinking about. Someone in your life needs to read this tonight. Thank you. Galini Diaries love you and value your stay. She kissed me on a Thursday. Of course, it was a Thursday. It was 20 past midnight. And the last customers had finally gone, and the bar had that particular late night quiet. The kind that feels almost sacred, like the room itself is exhaling. The music was still playing softly because nobody had remembered to turn it off. Marcus was stacking chairs at the far end, making just enough noise to pretend he wasn't paying attention to us. He was absolutely paying attention to us. Sophie came around from behind the bar. In 8 weeks of Thursday nights, I had never seen her do that while she was still working. That bar was hers. She moved behind it like it was part of her body. Certain, unhurried, every movement landing exactly where it was supposed to. But now she had stepped around it and she was walking toward me, and the way she was walking told me everything I needed to know before she said a single word. She stopped in front of me. Close. Close enough that I could see the small details of her. The faint tiredness around her eyes from a long shift. The way a few strands of hair had come loose from where she'd tied it back. The way she was breathing, slow and deliberate, like she was making a decision with every breath. She looked at me the way she looked at everything she cared about, carefully, like I was worth getting right. Then she reached up and put her hand against my face. Her palm was warm against my jaw, and I felt that touch go all the way through me, all the way down, to somewhere deep and still that hadn't been touched in a very long time. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just felt her hand on my face and looked at her looking at me, and the whole world got very small and very quiet. She leaned in, and she kissed me. I want you to understand what this kiss was, because it was not a small thing. It started soft. The first second of it was almost careful, almost hesitant, like the opening of something. And then she felt me kiss her back, and something changed. Something shifted. The hand on my face moved into my hair, and the careful softness became something else entirely. Something deeper. Something that had clearly been held back for a long time and was done being held back. I gripped the edge of the bar stool to keep myself grounded. Her other hand found my waist and pulled me forward slightly, and I went. Because of course I went. And the kiss became the kind that makes you lose track of where you are and how long it has been and whether the world outside this moment still exists. The kind that starts in your lips and moves through your whole chest and down into your stomach and leaves your hands unsteady. The kind that people write about and you think they are exaggerating until it is happening to you, and you realize they were not exaggerating, even slightly. Marcus dropped a chair somewhere at the far end of the bar. Neither of us flinched. When she finally pulled back, slowly, like she didn't fully want to, she didn't go far. Her forehead came to rest against mine. Her hand was still in my hair. Both of us were breathing like we'd been running. She laughed softly. Just a breath of a laugh, low and private. 8 weeks, she said quietly. 8 weeks, I agreed. She pulled back just enough to look at me properly. And her eyes were dark and soft, and she looked at me like I was something she had been looking for and was only just now allowing herself to believe she had found. I should have done that sooner, she said. Yes, I said. You absolutely should have. She laughed again. The real one this time, the one I had been collecting since the first Thursday, and she dropped her forehead to my shoulder for just a moment. Her hand found mine and held it. I could feel her pulse at her wrist, quick and warm. We stayed like that for a while. Neither of us was in any hurry to move. The music played softly, and Marcus very quietly finished what he was doing and let himself out of the bar and locked up behind him, leaving his keys on the counter without a word, because Marcus was a person who understood things. The bar was ours, and we stayed in it, made close together in the quiet, and we started to talk. I need to go back now, because this story does not start here, at midnight, with rain on the windows and her hand in mine. It starts 8 years before this, in a smaller city, on a cold wall behind a school sports block with a girl who couldn't look at me when she said the truest thing she'd ever said out loud. Her name was Sophia Mensah. She went by Sophie to everyone except her grandmother, who had named her and considered the full version non-negotiable on the grounds that a name that beautiful should never be shortened. I was 15 when I met her. She was a year above me, which at that age feels like a whole different country with its own customs and rules. She had a kind of presence that didn't announce itself. She didn't walk into rooms loudly. She just walked in, and the room adjusted around her without knowing it had. She argued with teachers when she thought they were wrong, not to cause trouble. She genuinely had no interest in trouble for its own sake. She just had this complete inability to let an incorrect thing stand uncorrected. She'd raise her hand and say, very calmly, "I think there's a problem with that, and here's exactly why." Half the time she was right. The whole room would know it. The teacher would know it. And Sophie would go back to whatever she was drawing in her notebook margin like nothing had happened. She drew in the margins of every notebook she owned, birds mostly, with extraordinary detail, buildings, faces caught mid-expression, and occasionally, entirely without explanation, extremely accurate drawings of vegetables. A cabbage that became legendary, an onion so precisely rendered that a teacher once stopped a lesson to ask who was responsible. I knew who she was the way you know people in a school, by sight, by reputation, by the particular texture of their presence in a corridor. We had never spoken properly. She was a year ahead and we moved in different orbits, and that, I assumed, was simply how it would stay. Then October came and Mrs. Josephine announced a paired history project on post-war migration and read out the names from her list and said mine, and then said Sophie's. And I looked across the room and Sophie was already looking at me with an expression that said she was equally unenthusiastic about this arrangement. We were both wrong about that. We just didn't know it yet. We met for the first time properly on a Tuesday after school in the library. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her notebook open and 3 textbooks stacked neatly beside her. She had a system already, color-coded notes, a timeline sketched out in pencil, sections allocated between us before I'd even sat down. She slid a piece of paper across the table. "I thought we could divide it like this," she said. "Unless you have a different approach?" I looked at the paper. It was thorough, detailed. She had clearly spent time on it. "This works," I said. She nodded and opened her textbook. We worked in silence for the first hour. Not uncomfortable silence, the productive kind, the kind that happens when 2 people are actually focused on the same thing. Occasionally, one of us would say something about the project. The other would respond. Then quiet again. At some point, she pushed her notebook toward me without looking up from her textbook. In the margin, beside her notes, she had drawn a tiny bird. And underneath it, an arrow pointing to a paragraph she'd written with a small note. "This part is confusing. Does this make sense to you?" I looked at it. I looked at the paragraph. I wrote underneath, "Not really. I think the textbook is wrong, actually." I pushed it back. She read it. A small smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She wrote, "I thought so too, but I didn't want to say it first." I wrote, "We can fact check it. I think I have a better source at home." She wrote, "Bring it Thursday." I wrote, "Same time Thursday?" She looked up then, properly for the first time. And she smiled. Not a polite smile, a real one, and said, "Same time Thursday." That was how the notebook started. We met every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 weeks. The project gave us a reason. But somewhere around week 2, it stopped being only about the project. The notebook filled up. What had started as questions about sources and shared notes became something else. Observations, small jokes, things we'd thought about and hadn't said to anyone else. She drew in the margins constantly, and I started writing around her drawings, incorporating them, responding to them. She drew a bird mid-flight, and I wrote underneath it, "Where is it going?" She wrote back, "Somewhere warmer," obviously. I wrote, "Fair enough." She drew a tiny version of me next to the bird, which I only recognized because of the coat I always wore and the particular way she'd drawn the hair. I didn't say anything about the drawing, but I didn't stop looking at it either. By week 3, I was noticing things I hadn't noticed before. The way she tapped her pen against her lip when she was thinking. The way she always arrived before me and always had tea waiting. She'd started buying 2 cups from the machine in the corridor without being asked. 1 for each of us, both exactly right without her ever asking how I took it. She'd just paid attention. By week 4, I was noticing the way she smelled. Something warm, something that made me think of being indoors when it was cold outside. I noticed that when I said something that genuinely surprised her, she'd go briefly still before she responded. Now, like she needed a second to recalibrate. I noticed that she laughed quietly, but entirely, like she was fully in it. By week 5, I understood what was happening inside me and spent the entire 2-hour session unable to look at her directly. She noticed. At the end of that Tuesday, she stopped packing her bag and looked at me. "Are you okay?" she said. "Fine," I said. Too quickly. She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked back at her bag and finished packing it and said nothing else. But the following Thursday, when I sat down, she pushed the notebook toward me before we'd even started. In the margin at the top of a fresh page, she had drawn 2 people sitting across a table from each other. One of them was clearly me, the coat, the hair, looking down. The other one, clearly her, was looking across at the first. And underneath, she had written, "You went quiet last time. Just checking you're still here." I read it. I felt my face go warm. I wrote underneath, "I'm here. Sorry. Just had a strange week." She wrote, "Okay, you can tell me about it if you want, or not. Either is fine." I wrote, "Maybe later." She wrote, "Whenever." And she opened her textbook and we got back to work and she didn't push it and she didn't make it strange and that, somehow, made everything worse. In the best possible way. The project was due in December. We handed it in on a Thursday. Mrs. Josephine looked through it and told us it was one of the better submissions she'd received in years, which we later agreed was either a genuine compliment or a very low bar. And we walked out of school side by side into the cold December afternoon, feeling the particular lightness of something finished. We stood on the pavement outside the school gates. We had no reason to meet on Tuesday anymore. No reason for Thursday. The project was done and we were from different years and that was simply how it would go. "Well," she said. "Well," I said. She had her bag over one shoulder and her notebook under her arm. She carried it everywhere, always. And she was looking at me with that expression I'd come to know over 6 weeks. The one where she was deciding something. "I could still use a fact checker," she said. "For other things, generally." I looked at her. "What other things?" "Things," she said with complete seriousness. "Important things. Things that require a second opinion." "That is extremely vague," I said. "Take it or leave it," she said. "I'll take it," I said. She nodded like that was settled. She shifted her notebook under her arm. "Tuesday then," she said. "Tuesday," I said. "Same time." She walked away and I stood on the pavement in the cold and watched her go and thought, I am in so much trouble. We kept meeting. No project now. Just us, in the library corner, or the cafe near school that stayed open late, or sometimes just walking with nowhere particular to go. The notebook kept filling. She kept drawing. I kept writing back. She told me things she said she didn't usually tell people, about her grandmother who had named her and who she missed. About the way she found most people exhausting, but certain people, rare people, felt like the opposite of exhausting. About how she drew because it was the one thing that made the inside of her head quiet. I told her things I hadn't said out loud before either, about feeling like I was always slightly out of step with the world around me, about the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling alone. She listened the way she did everything, completely, without performing it, with that small tilt of her head that said every word. I'm here for every word. And somewhere in all of that, the feeling I had identified in week 4 grew and deepened and became something I carried around with me all the time, like something precious that I was terrified of dropping. She held my hand for the first time in January. And we were walking home and the path was icy, and she reached out to steady me and then simply didn't let go. Her hand was warm, even in the cold. We walked the rest of the way like that, through the dark winter streets and the amber streetlights, and neither of us mentioned it, and both of us knew. She kissed me for the first time in February. We were in the library after hours, in our usual corner. She was drawing and I was reading, and at some point I looked up and found her already looking at me. That steady look, taking me in, deciding. She put down her pen. She leaned across the table slowly and she kissed me. Once, soft and certain and brief. Then she sat back and picked up her pen like nothing had happened. "Sophia," I said. "Nadia," she said very calmly, eyes on her notebook. I picked up her eraser and threw it at her. She caught it without looking, without even blinking, just reached up and took it out of the air like she'd always known exactly where it was going. And she was smiling. I could see it from across the table. That smile. Private and warm and slow. Just for me. Then November came. We had been circling it for weeks, both of us feeling something, both of us not yet ready to say it properly. We'd held hands and she'd kissed me in the library and the notebook had become something deeply personal, but neither of us had put a name on it yet. Neither of us had said the actual words. It was a cold afternoon. And we were sitting on the wall behind the school sports block, the place we'd started going to escape everyone else. And she was drawing and I was pretending to read and the sky was doing that thing where it got dark too early and the world felt like it was closing in. She stopped drawing. She looked at her notebook for a moment, not at me. And then she said it. Quietly, directly, the way she said everything that mattered. "I think I like you. Actually like you, not just as a friend. I've been sitting with it for a while and I decided it was better to say it than keep not saying it. So, that's what I wanted you to know." Her pen was still in her hand. She still wasn't looking at me. She was brave enough to say the true thing, but not quite brave enough to watch my face while she waited to find out if I would say it back. She was giving me the words and trusting me to do something good with them. I said, "I've been trying to figure out how to tell you the same thing for months." She looked up. The smile arrived, slow and warm and private, the one she kept for herself, the one that was, in that moment, entirely for me. "Okay," she said softly. "Good. Good," I said back. In the heat of the moment, she pulled me closer and locked her lips on mine. At first, I thought I was dreaming, not until she went deeper. She kissed me so hard I didn't realize when I opened up and reciprocated, kissing her so badly we almost got caught by other students before breaking apart. She looked back at her notebook, but she was still smiling. I could see it from the side, and it was the best thing I had ever seen. And this is the first French kiss I will ever have. And 3 months of something that belonged completely to us. We didn't announce it. Not from shame, neither of us had any patience for shame, but because it was new and warm and ours and we wanted to hold it close for a little while before the world got to have an opinion on it. She would fall into step beside me between classes, close enough that our arms touched. At lunch, she'd draw while I talked, and I'd pretend to be annoyed she wasn't looking at me. And she'd say, "I always listen better when my hands are busy." And she was right, because the drawings were always exactly what I'd been describing. And then February. She got sick without warning. The way illness arrives in young people who are not supposed to be ill. Suddenly, without asking permission, one without giving anyone time to understand what is happening before it has already happened. Her heart. Something has been wrong since birth, sitting quietly inside her all this time. And now it had stopped sitting quietly. She was in hospital within a week. I visited twice before her parents stopped me coming. Her mother held my hands in the corridor and said it was better if Sophie rested. Better if she focused. She said it gently. She meant it gently. I was 16. I didn't know how to stand in a hospital corridor and fight for something I had only just found the words for. The second time I visited, at the end of the hour, Sophie had taken my hand and said, "Come Thursday. Promise me Thursday." Same time Thursday, I said, "I promise." I never made it. 6 weeks later, my mother took a phone call in the kitchen. When she came into the next room where I was sitting, her face said everything before her mouth did. Sophie's mom called, "Love, she's gone. I'm so sorry." I went to my room and got the notebook and sat with it in my lap and turned the pages slowly.
I miss you.
All her drawings, all the notes we
Why did
passed,
you have to
our whole
leave?
conversation in the white space, all the way
I
to the
wish I
very
could
last
tell you
page
how
where in the
much I
bottom
miss
margin,
you.
in letters so small I had to hold it
Why
close.
did you have to leave?
Same time Thursday, N, always.
I wish I could
The
tell
crying
you
came
how
after a
much
while.
I miss
I
you.
cried so much I could barely eat.
Why
At one
did you
point I
have
fell
to
ill.
leave?
I let it go on for a long time. Time flies like birds. 8 years later. 8 years of a closed door and a notebook I couldn't throw away, and a name I stopped saying out loud because saying it made the missing too specific to manage. I was 24 when I moved to a new city. New flat, new streets, new reasons to get up. The kind of move you make when you need the world to look different for a while. I walked into a bar called Halogen on a Thursday evening in October because it was raining and the lights looked warm from outside. I sat at the counter. I ordered something. And then I looked up at the woman behind the bar. Dark, steady eyes. A way of moving that was completely certain, like her body always knew exactly where it was. She set a glass down without looking, reached for the next thing. Moved on. Something moved in my chest. I told myself I was tired. I told myself grief bends the mind toward familiar shapes. I left a tip and went home and lay awake and called myself irrational. I went back the following Thursday. I kept going back. Week 3, she knew my order. In week 4, she was making it the moment I walked through the door. Week 6, during a quiet moment, I watched her pick up a pen and draw on a paper napkin without seeming to notice she was doing it. When she moved away, I leaned over and looked. A bird. Small and exact. Every single feather in its right place. My hands went cold. Did you ever live in a city called Millhaven? The cloth in her hand stopped moving. Why? Because I grew up there, and there was a girl I knew when I was 16. I held her gaze. Her name was Sophia. She went by Sophie. Well, she died. She died, and I was expected to move on like nothing happened. I said with tears laced on my eyes. The bar kept going. Music. Voices. All of it somewhere else. She set the cloth down. What was your name? Past tense, like she already knew. Nadia, I said. She closed her eyes, on her hand gripping the cloth she was holding tighter. When she opened them, they were wet with tears. She sat me down, then told me everything. The clinic abroad, the 24 months of treatment, the wall her parents had built around her with the best intentions in the world. How she'd found out years later what people had been told. How by then too much time had passed and she didn't know where I was and didn't know if I'd want to know. How she'd moved to this city 2 years ago for follow-up treatment and stayed because staying felt easier than moving again. How she had known it was me the moment I walked through the door in October, but wasn't sure if I remembered her since 6 years is a long time. How she had drawn my face from memory every single night in that clinic, and it was the only thing that had helped her get through the worst of it. You let me sit here for 8 weeks, I said. I know, she said. I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were now. I was afraid too much time had passed and you wouldn't. Sophie, I called her name out loud for the first time in 8 years. She pressed her lips together. You've been here, I said. This whole time. She nodded, just once. And the look on her face was the same one from the library, the one that said she was giving me something true and trusting me to hold it carefully. Marcus quietly found something to do at the complete opposite end of the bar. We talked until the bar was empty and dark, and he had left his keys on the counter and let himself out. And at the end of the night, she handed me my coat, and our hands met properly, and neither of us moved. Same time next Thursday, she said. Same time next Thursday, I said. 3 weeks later, she took my hand on the walk to the cafe. She reached over on the quiet street without saying anything and took it, and we walked the rest of the way like January all over again. Her hand warm in mine, neither of us letting go. At the cafe, she reached across the table and touched my face. I missed you, she said. Every single year. I leaned in and kissed her, slowly, both of us leaning on each other again after everything, her hand moving into my hair, the cafe going quiet around us. When we finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine and we just breathed together, and it was the most complete I had felt in 8 years. She told me she loved me the following month. A Thursday, naturally. She said it quietly, directly. A true thing being reported. I said it back before she'd finished the sentence, and she smiled. That smile, private and warm. The same one from a library table and a wall behind a sports block and every margin of every notebook we ever shared. Just for me. Same as always. In April, her doctor found something. The original surgery, the one at 17, had missed something. Something small. Something that had been growing quietly ever since in the way the worst things do. She told me at the cafe, both hands around her cup, steady voice. They want to do another surgery? When? 3 weeks. I looked at her. Same face, same eyes, and same person who had slid a color-coded plan across a library table on a Tuesday afternoon in October and changed everything without either of us knowing. I'll be in that waiting room, I said. Every hour. Nadia. Sophie. I leaned forward. I was 16 the last time someone kept me from being where you were. I didn't know how to fight for it then. I looked at her. I know now. I'll be there. Her jaw tightened, eyes wet, one slow nod. She reached across the table. I took her hand in both of mine and held on. The surgery was on a Thursday. Of course it was. She laughed when we realized, standing outside the hospital in the early morning cold, her breath making small clouds, and said, Of course it is. I'm very on brand. And I held her hand until they came to take her in, and she turned back once before the doors and looked at me and smiled. That private smile. Just for me. Then she was gone, and I sat in a plastic chair and I waited. 8 hours. Her mother beside me, now older than before, small and tired and frightened. She put her hand over mine and I held it. I thought about our library hideout back in school. A notebook passed across a table. This part is confusing. Does this make sense to you? Tea from a machine that she always got right without asking. An icy path in January and a hand that didn't let go. An eraser caught without looking. A wall behind a sports block and a girl who looked at a fixed point in the distance and said the truest thing she knew and waited to find out if I was brave enough to say it back. Jan, the doctor, came through the doors at 3:30. His face said it before his words did. Complication? Extensive. Everything possible. I'm sorry she didn't make it. She's dead. I heard every word. I sat very still and heard every word, and somewhere inside me I shook in fear, rushing towards the ward, screaming Sophie, all in tears. Taking off the clothes off her face, I pressed my forehead against her, breathing hard with tears rolling down my face. Telling her I was here, but she was stuffed. She didn't understand anything at all. Before I left the hospital, Sophie's mother took an envelope from her bag and held it in both hands for a long moment. Then she held it out to me. She asked me to give you this, just in case. She was very specific about that. Inside was a page from her sketchbook. Me, at the bar counter, from her side of it. My coat, my hands around a glass. The way I sat, the way I held things. Every detail observed and kept. At the bottom in her small, careful handwriting, Nadia. Same time next Thursday, same time always. I still go to Halogen every Thursday, same stool. Marcus makes my drink without being asked. Sometimes he leaves a clean paper napkin beside my glass, blank, unused, and I think he does it on purpose, and I think it is one of the kindest things anyone has ever done for me. I bring the drawing every time. I set it on the counter and I sit with it and I think about all of it. A library corner and a notebook pushed across a table. A cold December pavement outside school gates. A hand warm in mine on an icy path. A bar at midnight and a kiss that moved through me like something settling permanently into place. I think about her. On just that word. The way she said it. I think about a girl who was brave enough to say the true thing first, at 16 on a cold wall, at 24 across a bar counter, in a letter left with her mother just in case. She always said it first. The least I can do is keep answering and keep loving her. At the end of every Thursday, I fold the drawing carefully and put it in my pocket and walk home. And before I leave, I look at those small, careful letters at the bottom of the page. Same time always. And I say it back, out loud, to her. Same time always, Soph. Same time always. But with the hope that she was never coming back. Dropping flowers on her burial ground, I wiped off my tears and whispered, "See you, Soph. Same time always. If you cried reading this, you belong here. This channel is for people who feel things deeply, who fall hard, who love without holding back. Subscribe and join us. New story every week. Leave a comment below. Tell me your Thursday. Tell me who you still show up for. I read everything. Subscribe, share. Come back next Thursday. That is all I ask. Stories like this one every single week for people who still believe love is worth feeling everything for. See you soon.